Hello, and welcome to the Small Entrepreneur and Economic Development Legal Clinic's presentation on Founders Agreements. What is a Founders Agreement? A Founders Agreement is a document that states the rights and obligations of two or more people who intend to go into business together. A founder's agreement may include whatever terms and conditions the founding members agree to and would like to memorialize in their contract together. Typically, however, a founder's agreement will include provisions about the finances of the business venture, including how much each member will contribute and how expenses will be managed and paid. A founder's agreement will also typically include provisions about intellectual property, the intellectual property contributed by each member, but also the intellectual property created during the development of the business concept. So the founders agreement will address who owns the rights to that intellectual property. The agreement will also state the intention of the founding members to form a business entity once they have developed this business venture to the point where it is time to form a business entity. The agreement will typically state which type of entity they will form and what percentage of ownership each member will have in the formal business entity once it is formed. The founders agreement will also typically include a timeline for the agreement and the development of the business concept, including a plan for ending the relationship if the development of the business concepts fail. And lastly, one of the most important provisions that you can find in a founders agreement is how disputes will be resolved between the members. A tale of entrepreneurship and collaboration. Meet Jacob and Dylan, lifelong friends. They've decided to develop a unique soft drink in the bustling city of North Canton. The name of the company will be PepsiCo. They are still in the idea and planning stage and are not ready to formally register their business, but they want to protect themselves as they develop their soft drink and business model. They decide to formalize their plans in a founders agreement. When considering what to include in the founders agreement, Jacob and Dylan want to consider their purpose for the agreement and the business venture and their strategy. So they want to ask themselves questions such as, why are we starting this business? What is the purpose of the business? What is the concept? What is the business venture itself? What are the goals for the business? What are the goals for each of us individually? And what is our timeline for achieving these goals? The founders agreement should lay out the ownership and finances of the business venture. So it should detail who are the parties to the agreement, how will each member contribute to the business concept and the company, will everyone contribute money and capital, or will only some members contribute their time? The agreement should detail how much capital is being contributed, by whom, and for what purpose. It should detail who will get ownership in the official company once it is formed. And very important, the agreement should detail how expenses will be paid, who is responsible for paying them, and managing those finances on a day-to-day basis. As part of the discussion about ownership and finances, Jacob and Dylan will want to define their roles and responsibilities. Dylan is the more creative mind, so he's in charge of product design and marketing. Jacob is more of a numbers guy, so he will focus on finances and operation. Jacob and Dylan agree to the distribution of equity ownership in the company. They feel that this fair allocation reflects each founder's contribution and commitment to the development of the business concept, and it provides the foundation for a healthy and balanced partnership. Jacob and Dylan need to consider the management of the business venture and the management of the eventual business entity. Who will be responsible for day-to-day decisions? How will those decisions be made? Will they be unanimous member vote, majority vote, or will the executive officer be able to make those decisions? They'll have to decide if founders are going to be compensated. What procedure or process will be in place if one of the members wants to leave or becomes disabled or dies and is no longer able to contribute to the business venture? Will the business continue, or will the members decide to end the partnership? Will other members be able to buy the departed member's interest in the company? These are all questions that Jacob and Dylan will have to consider and answer and incorporate into their founders agreement. They need to determine, when considering the timeline, what are they going to do if the business development takes longer than they anticipated? Can the members engage in business development with others? And if they can, under what circumstances? In particular, Jacob and Dylan might want to put some prohibitions in place about working on businesses that would be in competition with this business. Jacob and Dylan will want to consider how disputes are going to be resolved among themselves and other members. Do they want to engage in some kind of dispute resolution process like mediation or arbitration? Lastly, as mentioned before, Jacob and Dylan will want to consider what their roles are, titles, and responsibilities. An important part of the founders agreement and contemplation for Dylan and Jacob is to determine how they will deal with conflict. Even the best of friends inevitably run into conflict when engaging in a business venture or starting a business. So it's important to contemplate and think about how you will deal with those conflicts when they arise. So there are many different ways to deal with conflict resolution. You can engage in alternative dispute resolution like arbitration or mediation. You can also provide other processes that Dylan and Jacob consider and agree to participate in to resolve conflict. Dylan and Jacob and other founders like Dylan and Jacob will want to consider exit strategies. So not only will they want to consider what happens if the business venture fails, they will want to consider strategies if something happens to one of the members, and then certainly they want to contemplate how things move forward should the business venture be successful. Additional considerations for Jacob and Dylan and other founding members of business ventures include confidentiality and intellectual property. So confidentiality, this would be where the founding members want to consider, whether they want to keep the business concept confidential, and whether or not there are other pieces of the business venture that should remain private or secret. And if so, how long those obligations will last. Jacob and Dylan also need to consider intellectual property. That refers to the ownership of ideas or creations of the mind, such as inventions, books, and music, or other special marks and words for this. So they need to consider who owns the intellectual property being contributed by each individual at the start of the business concept or business venture development. They will also want to consider who owns the intellectual property created and developed as part of the business concept itself. And then lastly, who makes the decisions about the use of intellectual property. Having discussed all of these considerations, Dylan and Jacob are ready to embark on their entrepreneurial journey with confidence and a shared vision for their new soda. Everything they've discussed and considered has been memorialized in a founders agreement, and they're able to move forward with developing their business with a strong and healthy foundation for the future. The above example shows how helpful it is to have a founders agreement before starting a business venture with another property. While it's not legally required, it is a good idea to have one because it creates a clear and mutual understanding of the expectations, goals, roles, and responsibilities of each party.